Começa agora o programa 20 Minutos com Breno Altman.
Bom dia! Está começando mais uma edição do programa 20 Minutos Internacional. Nosso convidado é Jalil Muntaqim. Nome de nascimento, Anthony Botten. Nascido em 18 de outubro de 1951, foi militante dos Panteras Negras e do Exército de Libertação Negra. Preso em agosto de 1971 e condenado à prisão perpétua pelo suposto assassinato de 2 policiais em Nova York, tinha direito à liberdade condicional desde 1993. Por 11 vezes, seu pedido foi negado, até que, finalmente, em outubro de 2020, depois de ficar mais de 49 anos encarcerado, saiu da cadeia. Good morning, Mr. Muntaqim, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. I'm glad to see you again, free and healthy, even if through virtual means. I remember that our first meeting 7 years ago was at the legendary Ltda prison, a maximum security penitentiary in New York State. Good morning, Mr. Muntaqim.
Good morning. Good morning. I have a pleasure to be here with you today. It's very nice to be out of prison, of course, after 49 plus years in prison, almost 50 years in prison, and being out in the world today. Of course, I've been released into this pandemic, having to deal with everything regarding the pandemic, but it's good to be out here with the pandemic rather than inside with the pandemic. That's for certain.
What went through your mind, Mr. Muntaqim? What did you feel and think when you were informed that you had been granted parole after so long in prison?
I felt elated. I felt freedom has finally come for me. I felt once again I'll be able to share some time, special time, quality time with my children, especially my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. As I think I mentioned when we last interviewed, that my daughter was in the womb when I was arrested. So I never spent a day in the streets with my daughter. And so it was very important for me to have this time with her and her children. And so I was very grateful for the opportunity to be released, that the parole board finally, after 14 parole hearings, decided that it was time to let this elderly man release from prison.
Who has informed you that you had granted parole?
The counselor. The counselor came to, it was funny too, because the counselor came to the cell I was locked in, and he says, he had an envelope in his hand, a manila envelope in his hand. And I said, that's the decision. He said, yes, that's the decision. And I said, whoa. So then he said, I hate to tell you that, but you're going to be with us for a little bit longer. And that took me back. I stood back. I didn't want to take the envelope from him, right? I said, a little bit longer. What does that mean? So he said, you have to read the envelope. So I opened up the envelope, and then it read that I will be here until October. That was in September. So his little bit longer was about 30 days, right? And so for me, that was a relief. He was basically, he was kidding with me about being there longer. So yeah, I jumped for joy to be released from prison after 50 years, and knowing that the work that I've done inside prison, now be able to take some of that work back to the community and be able to get back into organizing.
Did you expect to be granted parole after 11 times trying and receiving a negative answer?
Actually, it was 14 times.
14 times.
Yeah, 14 times. Yeah, 14 times.
I had lost the counting after so much time.
Yeah, a lot of people had lost counting, and a lot of people did not believe that was going to happen.
At the time we met each other for the first time, you had 11 or 10 or 11 trying to be granted parole again.
Right. And so, I always believed I was going to be released at one point or another. It just was a matter of time. And so there was a big campaign to change the composition of the parole board, and they were successful in doing so. So they got some of the right wingers out of the parole board and got some more moderate people in. who really recognized that this justice had been served in regards to the issues from which I was convicted and sent to prison for. 49 years, I was 19 years old when I went to prison, right? And I came out of prison 2 weeks before my 69th birthday. All right, so that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. And they recognized all my accomplishments that I had since I was in prison over 49 plus years in prison. And by giving that recognition and not being influenced by their own personal politics, right? But recognizing that, like I said, justice had been served, that it was time for me to be let go. But also keep in mind that a month and a half prior to, well, actually about 4 months prior to my release, I got COVID while I was in prison.
Oh, before?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And what happened was that prior to me getting COVID, my lawyers went to the judge and said, listen, this guy needs to be released because he is vulnerable to getting COVID. And the judge granted me to be released, right? I didn't get COVID yet. Granted me to be released. And the state appealed the granting of me being released. And in the interim, during the appeal process, I got COVID, right? Yes. And they had taken me out to the outside hospital. I was in the outside hospital for 5 days. I was on oxygen. They gave me all kinds of medications, blood plasma, the whole works in order to save me. And so then after the appeal, during the course of the appeal, the judges then decided, said, well, he already got COVID, so no need to let him out now. So they took me back to the prison. Right, crazy justice system. So they sent me back to the prison. And then a few months later, I went to the parole board, and they recognized that, there has been an injustice. And they decided, well, it's time to let this guy go anyway. So who's going to kick him out the system, kick him out the prison system, right?
Mr. Muntaqim, when we met in Attica, I asked you what you would like to do first when you returned to the streets. Your reply: walking with my daughter, grandchildren, and great-grandchild,
Yes.
then spend a few days with a beautiful woman, find a great love, return to the trench of the fight against poverty and oppression.
Yes.
You managed to carry out this minimum agenda despite
Absolutely. Every single one of them. Check, and check. Every single one of them. Like I said, I work with this organization called Citizen Action. And right now I'm trying to halt the school to prison pipeline. I'm tired of seeing these kids going to prison as young people and spending their most productive years inside prison. And one of the problems that we have here in Rochester, because Rochester is the third worst school system in the country, right? And so the adults, in my opinion, has failed the young people, right? Because they have not created the kind of resources that these young people need in order to stay in school, in order to be productive citizens, whatever that means, okay? And so therefore, they're basically throwing these kids into prison, right? Through the system, right? And not giving them the kind of, like I said, not giving them the resources they have to have so that they can build a productive life. And so my goal, my objective is to stop the school to prison pipeline. And so we're in a big fight right now on that here in Rochester. And matter of fact, since I've been out, we've organized a citywide teen organization. They call themselves TWA, Teens with Attitude. All right. And so they are fighting to make sure that the schools get fully funded, and also to change the curriculum of the school, so there are more ethnic studies in the schools, and also so they have more diversity in the schools, so that they have more Black and brown teachers in the schools. Rochester school system is 80% Black and brown, right? But the teacher staff is 90% European. That's a disconnect, right? And not only that, but the most of the Europeans are white women who live out in the suburbs. They don't even live in the city. So that's a serious disconnect. So why would students or young people go to school and look at individuals who, in all intent and purposes, do not necessarily have their best interests? They don't look like them. Their ethnic and their cultural values is not the same as these kids in the inner city. All right. So that's a serious disconnect. And so we're fighting to change that. my goal and objective, I said, then we need to have a new paradigm in teaching in Rochester, since this is ground zero, in my opinion, right? And remember now, this is the city of Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony, right? So this is a city that has a legacy of abolitionists, a legacy of emancipation, right? A legacy of suffrage, all right? And so we're going to rise up that legacy and rebuild a consciousness within this city for the purpose of saving our children, right? So they do not go to prison. And so that's what I've been working on since I've been out in prison.
Mr. Muntaqim, what the first days in freedom to exchange? Which were the strange things you feel in these first days?
Well, as you may have read, right? When I first got out of prison, they brought me from prison right to my parole office, and the parole office put a GPS on my ankle, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know if I can show you this, but I would like to.
Oh, you have a GPS on your ankle. Okay.
You see that? A GPS on my ankle.
Yeah.
So I'm still under surveillance, right? I'm still under surveillance. They still got me under scrutiny, right? First day I got out, and then they told me, said, go to social services, Department of Social Services, and see about getting whatever benefits that the state can provide you now that you're released from prison. And so I did that. Now, in the document that they gave me, I don't know if I can show you. Let's see if I can find one here. In the document that they gave me, it had some issues on there pertaining to prisoners or people right to vote. Oh, here it is. Mm-hmm. Right. This is the document that they gave me. All right, 4 pages, and on the back of the document, it has a question about having the right to vote. So, hey, I've been in prison almost 50 years. They say, take this, go in the corner, fill it out, bring it back. That's what I did. I filled it out from cover to cover. Okay, from cover to cover, I filled it out. 2 weeks later, they come and arrest me. 2 weeks they come and arrest me, saying that I had committed voter fraud because I registered to vote. Not because I did not know that I was not supposed to fill out that one page, right? So they gave me 2 felonies and a misdemeanor, brought me to court, charged me, held me in for about 8 hours, right? And then they released me on my own reconnaissance, so knowing that I will return to prison. I will return to court, right? When it comes time for me to return to court. So 2 weeks ago, about a week and a half ago, they dropped all the charges. Because it was silly. It was stupid. It was insane, right? But it's because the Republicans did not want me out of prison. They didn't want me in Rochester, put it that way, right?
The world is too different now than when you were arrested 50 years ago?
No. The police are still killing unarmed people, right? The economic situation is just as bad. Homelessness and poverty has been stabilized essentially, right, as a low for Black and brown people. They continue. Homelessness is a problem. Healthcare continues to be a problem for Black and brown people. So there's cosmetic changes. Yes, but no real substantial institutional changes. None. The value system, particularly in a white supremacist country, right? And I make that point explicitly clear that America is a white supremacist country, right? Has not changed. All right. In my teaching, some of my teachings, I got a course that I teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays, a Zoom course that I teach based upon my book since I've been out. And one of the things I tell people, I said, listen, the Confederates never lost the war. They were just dismantled, okay, as a fighting force. And so we always had this resurrection, this resurgence of the Confederates, right? In new colors, a new name, right? But the same ideology, same ideas that existed back in 1863, 1864, you know, prior to the ending of the Civil War. And so if we understand this history, of white supremacy in this country, then we know that at this point in time in our history, with this new resurgence of white supremacy, having elected this jerk off that they had in the White House, Donald Trump, that it will continue. And so our struggle in this country will continue to be one against racism and white supremacy, institutional racism and white supremacy. That is the heart of our struggle that we have to deal with. Now, where we change people's minds, at this point in time, I see a new generation of young people, and I have to give it to them. New generation of young people, black, white, brown, yellow, and red, right? Who are now recognizing that white supremacy is an aberration. White supremacy is an aberration to our humanity, right? That it is a neurosis, in my thinking. White people who believe themselves to be superior to any other people on the planet suffer some kind of mental ailment, right? And they're thinking they have a neurosis, and we have to address it in that term. It is a psychological aberration to even think that you are superior to all other people, particularly people of color on this planet.
Mr. Muntaqim, let's go back to the beginning of this story. How did you become a member of the Black Panthers Party and later of the Black Liberation Army?
Very good question. Now I have to go back to my own training as a young kid, right? As a young child. I was raised by my mom with the understanding that we are African people, right? My mom, as a young mother, she was a student of African dance, and as a student of African dance, she used to teach that to my sister and I when we were young kids. And her understanding of African dance, she used to tell us, we are African, we are descendants from Africa, right? And so we never really inculcated or internalized the idea of being a Negro or a colored person or any other derogatory name that was given to Black people during the course of our history in this country. And so I always grew up with the consciousness of being of African descent. And so during the period of Jim Crow, I had certain experiences that let me understand that the social order that we live in is discriminatory and racist as a young man. By the time I turned in my teens, I was engaged in organizing Black student unions in my high school. And that led to eventually coming in contact with members of the Black Panther Party who were friends of mine who had joined. So by the time I turned 16, I became a member of Black Panther Party. I signed up to become a member of Black Panther Party because of the kind of work that they was doing, the social engagement they was doing, the programs they were doing, the survival pending revolution programs that had been organized by the Black Panther Party in behalf of Black people. And that made my heart feel good. Made me realize that there's something more going on in our social order that I need to be a part of. My mom's had been a member of NAACP. She used to take me to marches as a young kid. And so therefore, there's a generational divide, of course, and a generational divide that young kids at that time felt that the old folks of the civil rights era was not doing enough. And so there had to be a new militant movement. And the Black Panther Party epitomized that new militant movement of young people. Keep understanding that the Black Panther Party was a youth organization, right? From its inception. I think the oldest person in the Black Panther Party was about 30 years old and younger. And so essentially it was a young people's movement, young people's organization. So by the time I was 18, I really got engaged, really more involved in the Black Panther Party, selling the newspaper, involved with the health clinic, involved with the Breakfast for Children program. And eventually, because of the kind of things that was going on, police killing of poor and innocent people, particularly Black people, as is going on today, continues going on today. The Black Panther Party had commenced to building a Black underground, right? And I eventually was recruited into the Black underground called the Black Liberation Army. Now I want to make this point explicitly clear.
What was the Black Liberation Army, a kind of military branch of the Black Panther Party?
That's the point I'm getting ready to make. At the inception, at the very origins of the Black Panther Party, it was known or believed that at some point in time it was going to be necessary to build a Black underground, a Black armed liberation force. And so the rule number 6 of the Black Panther Party was no Black Panther Party member can join any underground organization but the Black Liberation Army. So within the structure, within the writings of the Black Panther Party, it was already established that at some point in time there will be a Black Liberation Army. And so the process is by building the mass movement, right, the above ground movement of the Black Panther Party and providing these services to the community. They also had to build an underground, right, a militant initiative to preserve the Black Panther Party, but also preserve our own community against police terrorist violence. All right, and so the Black Liberation Army operated in that capacity. Now remember, Black Panther Party's original name was what? Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. All right, and so they knew from the very beginning, from the inception of the party, that it would be necessary to defend the community against police terror, against white supremacy. And so they separated the two, the above ground organization, the Black Panther Party, from the underground militant organization. The defending organization was the Black Liberation Army.
What did these organizations want? The socialist revolution in the most powerful capitalist country in the world?
That's an idea. That's an idea. Is that possible? Can we imagine a possibility that this capitalist system, this imperialist system, will be denigrate, that it will disintegrate from internally because of its own contradictions, that it will find itself in this very much serious situation like what happened in Yugoslavia or what happened in Russia, right? That it was split up and balkanized. Is that something that we can imagine a possibility? Why not? All right, why not? It's the same kind of idea that people imagined prior to the Civil War, that we can end chattel slavery. All right, can we imagine ending of chattel slavery? What would be the necessity? What would be the need for doing so? What kind of action we'd have to commit in order to do so? Right. So why not? Can we imagine the possibility of actual freedom in the United States? You know, all around the world, U.S. imperialism has engaged people in colonialism and neo-colonialist struggles. Right? There have been fights all over the world. In the time of the Black Panther Party, you have to remember now, during that period of time, there was armed struggle going on in Angola, armed struggle going in Mozambique, armed struggle going in South Africa, armed struggle going in Tanzania, armed struggle going in Uruguay, armed struggle going in Argentina. So, you know, we come out of that, the movement came out of that history, the international history of people who was rebelling against imperialism, rebelling against colonialism. And so why not we can imagine that on ourselves within the colonial structure, is the colonial dominant structure of the United States. Yes, we imagine the possibility.
Was the Black Panthers Party a Marxist organization?
We inculcated, we infused within the Black Panther Party many ideas, not only just Marxism or Leninism, but also the ideas of Mao Zedong, also the ideas of Kim Il-sung, also the ideas of Malcolm X. And we created, so one thing we cannot do in terms of struggle, we cannot take a ideological or theoretical basis or theory from 1917 and then make it applicable in 1960 or 1970, right? There has to be some adjustments because the social conditions has changed from 1917. And so we took what is best, what the ideas that are universal from those days, and we adjusted them, tweaked them, make them work for us here in the United States. And so that was the idea of the Black Panther Party. I can't say it was a Marxist-Leninist organization, but it took pieces of the ideology and pieces of the theory of Marxist-Leninism and made it applicable to our own given social conditions.
Did you Black Panther militants see yourselves mainly as an anti-capitalist or an anti-racist organization?
Both. I can't say no more than that. Anti-capitalist and anti-racism, of course.
How did the Black Panthers manage to have the political and cultural influence they achieved?
Well, first of all, we got to remember now, We got to understand the social conditions in which the Black Panther Party arises out of. It arises out of the civil rights movement. All right. When Willie Ricks and Stokely Carmichael in the march to I think Birmingham said that the Black Panther, that the movement was out of civil rights movement. They came up with the slogan Black Power, right? That changed the dynamics from the civil rights movement of being a passive resistance movement into the question of Black Power, right? And out of that growth, that understanding, that kind of consciousness raising, right, evolved also the Black Panther Party out of Oakland, California. The question of Black Power became vogue, right? Not so much as being integrated and assimilated into the social order, but to obtain power, to retrieve power for our own communities. And so the Black Panther Party came out of that dynamic, all right? I remember that the Black Panther Party, the symbol of the Black Panther Party came out of the Democratic Freedom Party of Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, who had the symbol, the Black Panther, all right? So when Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seals decided they was going to build this movement, build this organization, they took that symbol from the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party, a symbol of Black Panther, and they brought it to Oakland. And they decided at that point in time to raise the ideas of how Black Power will be manifested in our community under the aegis, under the capacity of them organizing their community, and particularly in Oakland, under the banner of the Black Panther Party.
Which was the role of social assistance, like the breakfast for the children, for the poor children, for instance?
The role of that was actually to provide a service to the community. You know, anytime you have an organization of militants or any organization whatsoever that serves the masses, right? You have a dialectical relationship between the people and the organization. And naturally, if you serve the people, if you fight for their interests, their basic needs, then they will support the party. They'll support that organization, right? Recognize that organization authentically is working in their best interest. And so there's that kind of symbiotic relationship between the party and the community itself, which they were establishing itself across the country. Now today, the free breakfast program has been incorporated in school systems across the country, where they did not exist before. Now they do, right? I also keep in mind that at the time when the Black Panther Party was evolving, right, there was no sickle cell research going on. Black Panther Party made that argument for sickle cell research. Remember, during that period of time, there were no free health clinics during that time. With Black Panther Party, they created the conditions for free health clinics across the country. And so by providing these kind of social services, they were able to gain the support of the community in regards to the goals and objectives they were trying to achieve.
Why do you think, Mr. Muntaqim, it was not possible to build a large mass socialist party in the United States, even at the height of the struggle against the Vietnam War and for civil rights?
That's a good question. The system of capitalism is very strong. They use every resource they possibly can to ensure that it maintains itself, maintains its own existence. Everything from the forms of media. There's a book called Mass Psychology of Fascism, right, by a guy named Wilhelm Reich, and he speaks to a certain degree how the psychology of fascism is inculcated into a system of indoctrination, right? And so the United States as a system has created the means by which they indoctrinate large swath of people, right? And they use the education system as one means. So they continue to have individuals who are taught that the capitalist system is the best system, right? And so they are raised in this ideology, into this perspective of how they are to live in society at large, right? Individualism and competition is part of the system in and of itself. And therefore it preserves itself by teaching young people and growing up into the system to think in that way, to think. And naturally the system bash anything that is not a capitalist system, right? Socialism, as an example. Socialism is the big boogeyman, you know, in the capitalist social order, and they are taught that through the process of media and also school. So psychological conditioning and behavior is part of the system itself, right? And in order to maintain it, its existence. Okay, and so that is a major problem. Yes, there have been times in the history of the United States where there were potential growth in socialist movement, growth in the so-called communist movement, but oftentimes they are betrayed, right? They are infiltrated and they are destroyed from within. COINTELPRO, as an example, under the aegis of the FBI,
the FBI program against the leftist movements.
Against the leftist movement, very instrumental. Since 1925, when COINTELPRO actually really came into existence. The first target of COINTELPRO, one of the first targets of COINTELPRO was Marcus Garvey and his movement, the Back to Africa movement. You know, he's one of the targets. And so they, over the years, they've been able to strengthen their capacity to destroy a movement from within, a movement domestically. They had the Socialist Party was targets of COINTELPRO. The Communist Party was targets of COINTELPRO. The McCarthy era created another new era of boogeyman of the communists and the socialists, right? And therefore serve to preserve the idea that capitalist system is the best system. All right. So by the time that the Black Panther Party came into existence in 1966, October of 1966, they had to deal with a organization, particularly the FBI, who was well honed in their capacity to destroy a movement, right? They used every type of tactic that they used to destabilize a country to destabilize the Black Panther Party. Every tactic they used to destabilize a country, they used against the Black Panther Party. You know, when J. Edgar Hoover said that the Black Panther Party is the greatest internal threat to the United States, right? And made the Black Panther Party a severe target, right, to be destroyed. And they did everything they possibly can to do so, and they did. They succeeded in destroying the Black Panther Party. You know, well, remember now, I'll keep in mind, Black Panther Party was a youth organization, a lot of young people, and we, although we had the enthusiasm, we had the will, we had the spirit to fight back, we did not have all the scientific understanding of the forces that we was going up against, that we were opposing. All right, and so sometimes we had to, we needed to take a step back and really look at this government and its capacity to destroy movements and how do they do so. And so now today we find that young people are once again rising up and looking at the things at a different angle, how to engage this beast, right, of capitalist imperialism.
As far as I understand, you think that the main reason for the Black Panthers to be destroyed was the intervention of the FBI, of the repression. But I would like to ask you something. Why Black Panther space has never been occupied by a similar organization, in your opinion, in the last 40 years?
Okay, very good question. And these are lessons learned. With the destruction of the Black Panther Party, the United States realized that they had to do something even more to ensure that there's never a renewal of the Black Panther Party. And so one of the things that they did was saturate the Black community with drugs, right? They created conditions by which the Black community was saturated with drugs, right? The growth and development of the heroin epidemic after the Vietnam War, right? The Golden Triangle, where drugs were being imported into the United States. The Iran-Contra gate story of guns for drugs, where cocaine was saturating and the CIA imported drugs, imported cocaine, was saturated into the Black community. The crack epidemic was one that was supported by the government to ensure that there would never be a upsurge of militancy in the Black community. So that's part of the process. The other part of the process was to incorporate those who are militants or those who are quasi-militant in regards to, or let's say, progressive in terms of the movement, right? And so they created these nonprofits, right, and began to these poverty programs that began to develop in the community. And so they were doling out money to these poverty programs in order to quell militancy, right? And they had individuals who were on the dole, getting these funds from the government, and then going into the community and tampering down a militancy, right? What we call poverty pimps. Okay, they're pimping the movement for the money.
Which was the Black Panther Party orientation about drugs?
Drugs is death. That a pamphlet was put out at that time. I think it was Michael Tabor and
Black Panthers Party militants were forbidden to consume drugs.
No drugs, no drugs, and no alcohol. No drugs or alcohol, particularly if you are engaged in the activities of the party, right? And we had put out a pamphlet called "Dope Equals Death." That was one of the major position of the party in regards to drug dealers. We try to get drug dealers out of our community. We try to get the pimps out of our community. We try to get those who exploited our young women and young men out of the community. That's one of the major fights that we had as part of the development of the Black Panther Party in the community. And people recognized that the work that we was doing and trying to clean up the social and moral ethics, social and moral values in our community.
Was there a connection between the Black Panthers Party and the Muslim religion? For instance, why have you changed your name from Anthony Button to Jalil Muntaqim?
That's more personal than political. 1972, I was transferred from California to a prison in a jail in New York. And while I was in that jail, I met two individuals who were, in my opinion, as a young man, were icons of the civil rights movement and the youth movement at the time. One was by the name of H. Rap Brown, and the other one by the name of Max Sanford. Max Sanford was the leader of an organization called Revolutionary Action Movement. H. Rap Brown had been the leader in SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and had also became a member of the Black Panther Party. I think he was the Minister of Justice at one point in time for the Black Panther Party. And they had converted to Islam. They converted to Islam. I think one of the bases of it was the influences of El Hajj Malik Shabazz that we all know by Malcolm X, right? And so I argued with them when I came into that jail and saw these guys had changed their names from Max Sanford to Muhammad Ahmed, and from Rap Brown to Jamil Alameen. I questioned, what's going on here? Why you guys now become these spiritual religion type thing? When we're supposed to be out here fighting the good fight, right? And so at some point in time, I came to learn that throughout our history, particularly the history of Black people in struggle, there's always been this kind of belief system, right? There's always been leaders who had the belief in the divine, right? God, or whatever name you want to name what you want to call it. Whether it was the Reverend Nat Turner, to Lamarcus Garvey, to Martin Luther King, to Malcolm X. And so that history of spirituality and political goals and objectives or political values always been meshed together within the leadership, within the building of a movement, particularly a Black movement in the United States. And so there are certain things that I've learned about the difference between, for instance, Christianity and Islam that felt more right to me, felt more whole to me, more complete for me. And then, therefore, I converted to Islam, recognizing that it would not stop me from engaging in struggle, right? In fact, it encouraged me to engage in struggle. One of the passages in the Quran says, fight tumult and oppression wherever you may find it, because tumult and oppression is worse than slaughter. And that particular passage really spoke to me. And that was what really evolved for me to accept the religion or the faith, the rituals of that faith, and to change my name to Jalil Muntaqim.
Let me ask you a sensitive question. As a Black Liberation Army militant, do you recognize that you have taken part in armored actions, including the ones you were accused for?
I was convicted of the killing of 2 police officers. That's a fact, right? That's what I was convicted of, and that's what I did almost 50 years in prison.
You took part in this action. You recognize it.
I recognize, yes, absolutely I do.
Mr. Muntaqim, do you regret the choices you made that led you to spend so much time behind bars? Has it worth such a high price?
That's another interesting question. From a moral, human perspective, no one wants to see the loss of life. No one. If you're a human being, you never want to see the loss of life, right? Never, if it comes from the right or it comes from the left, right? And so in that instance, I will always have regret for the loss of life. I will live with that for the rest of my life, all right? And that's important for people to know. The idea of having to engage in struggle that results in the loss of life indicates to what degree that oppression bounds individuals and prevent their own liberation and their own independence. All right. And so, in as much as we want to put the onus on the individuals who engage in struggle, I think the onus actually should be put on the system of oppression, the system of repression that tries to destroy people's lives and keep people in a degree of bondage. That's where the onus belongs.
Mr. Muntaqim, do you still see the revolutionary and anti-racist struggle with the same eyes as when you were arrested? Do you identify yourself, for example, with the Black Lives Matter movement? What have changed in your mind about the social and political struggle in the United States?
Okay. There's 2 parts to that question.
Yes. Combo. 2 questions in one.
Combo question. Okay. The first part of that question is, am I the same guy that I was when I was 19 years old at the age of 69? Of course not. Impossible. Right? That's saying that I have not matured or not grown or not evolved from a 19-year-old hot-headed militant to a now 69-year-old great-grandfather. Of course there's been differences. There has been a lot of change, a lot of growth, a lot of development, a lot of study, right, in 50 years of reading books and testing theory into practice. In that period of time, I've written 2 books, published 2 books, and built relationships, built organizations, built national campaigns in that period of time. Had the first petition submitted to the United Nations that are organized. Had the first national prisoners newspaper at that time. Has an organization that exists today that I'm the founder of called the Jericho Movement. Yeah, that I organized when I was in prison. And so, of course, during the course of the years of imprisonment, there has been growth and involvement and change. Now, in regards to the existence of the Black Lives Matter movement, right? It's important for us to understand the Black Lives Matter movement is a trend. It's a tendency. It's not necessarily a movement, okay? Although they have a platform, it is so decentralized as an organization that it has not really have any major impact outside of social consciousness. So in my thinking, the Black Lives Matter movement or Black Lives Matter tendency is what is a social consciousness movement, very similar to the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was a social consciousness movement to raise people's consciousness to understanding that there has to be some kind of institutional change in the social order. All right. But in terms of being a militant revolutionary movement, it is not that. Right. And we need not confuse those two. Okay. But as a social consciousness movement, it is very effective in raising people's consciousness. One thing that's important to understand in regards to as being a social conscious movement was why would anyone have to come up with the idea that Black Lives Matter, right? That suggests that there are people who are thinking that Black lives did not matter, right? That there was no value to Black lives, all right? So just the idea that three women had to come up with this slogan, hashtag, and create this national and also international perspective that Black Lives Matters indicates to what degree that Black lives have been denigrated, right, in our own humanity. And so that speaks volumes in terms of a social movement, social consciousness movement. And so that's what they was able to achieve at this point in time. Unfortunately, there's need to be more. We need to create conditions by which we actually challenge the institutions that continue to denigrate and dehumanize Black lives, right? And we're not there yet, right? The Black Panther Party attempted to do that back in the 60s and the early 70s, but we're not there yet today. And that is the next level. That's the next point of struggle that we need to begin to organize towards, right? Building the kind of militancy and kind of a movement that actually demands substantial institutional change. And so that's where we're moving towards in the next epoch, or this epoch of struggle in the United States.
How do you define yourself in terms of ideology and political tendencies nowadays?
I don't know if I understand that question.
How do you define yourself ideologically nowadays?
Ideologically?
Your political option and your ideological identity nowadays. How do you define yourself about ideology and political orientation?
I'm a revolutionary, right? But now let me explain that to you, right? You take the word revolution, you take the R off. What do you have? Evolution, right? And so when you take the R off, you have evolution. Then what is a revolutionary? A revolutionary is one who engages in the practice of evolutionizing social order, right? From one level of existence to another level of better existence, or from a quantitative to a qualitative state of existence. So I'm one who engages in struggle, the purpose of raising our level of humanity from one level to a higher level, a more perfect
level. Which level we do know what we're talking about? We are talking about capitalism and racism, but what level?
What level?
Yeah,
that's yet to be defined, right? It's a work in progress. We're not there yet, that's for certain. All right, but we're engaging, and for long as the evolutionary process is moving forward, right, and not regressing or not being stagnant, then there's progress. All right, so I put the R on evolution, right, because our human existence is based upon evolution, right? We are always, as a humanity, we're always evolving, right, to a better state, a higher state of our own interactions and interrelationship with one another, right, on this planet. And we are protectors of this planet for the most part, right? At least those of us who are not capitalist imperialists and profiteers, who finds that our labor and the resources need to be exploited for the profits of a few, to the detriment of the many. All right. So if you're not in that ilk, you're not in that category, then our evolutionary process is for the improvement of our humanity across the board. All right. So that is how I define myself and the work that I'm doing. It's an evolutionary process by ways of a revolutionary means.
If you had been able to vote in the last presidential elections, would you have supported Joe Biden?
No.
Why not?
You know, Malcolm X once used the analogy between the fox and the wolf. And said they both belong to the canine family. So what choice do I have when they both are dogs?
Of course.
Of course. They're both capitalists, they're both imperialists, right? And one may show their fangs in their teeth, and the other ones may hide it behind a smile.
But life is not better without Trump?
Of course. But we got to qualify what you mean by better. It gives us a greater opportunity to organize. It does not have to be such extreme as the white supremacists would like for it to be. And so therefore they had a defeat, right? Not a destruction, but a defeat. And so they continue to organize white supremacists. And the neoliberals of the Biden ilk, right, continues to uphold the ideas of capitalist imperialism, of profiteering and exploitation, of oppression on one level or another. So they may not be as blatant as a Trump, right? They may cosmetically put a neocolonialist like a Kamala Harris, right, to stand next to him, next to him, right? But her ideas, her social values are just the same as his, right? And she will maintain the idea that we need black people to represent black people who represent capitalist imperialism. That's neocolonialist thought. That's neocolonialist idea, right? And it maintains the system of oppression, right? You cannot have a capitalist social order without exploitation and profiteering, right? Without competition and individualism, right? That's the foundation of the capitalist order. And so for us, right, in understanding what Kamala Harris represents is no more than what what's this guy name? The last president, vice president, in support of Trump. You know, they all Pence in support of Trump. You know, they're all going to do the same thing. You know, so Kamala Harris in blackface is going to do the same thing as an individual in whiteface. You know, it's just blackface. We call blackface, black skin, white mask. You know, as France Fanon would say.
What is your assessment of the Barack Obama administration, the first black man to preside over the United States?
What has he done for black people?
Sorry?
Other than make them feel good. He created more people went to prison under his administration than almost as many as under Clinton administration. More black people were murdered under his administration than both Clinton and Bush administration. You know, so there was a backlash to his presidency, right? To the extent that they voted for Trump afterwards, right? He had a grand opportunity to change institutions of America, to change the whole foundation by which capitalist imperialism exists, and he failed miserably. Right? He failed miserably not only in the United States, but he failed miserably all over the world in terms of the growth and development of the African Command, right? In Africa, the military African Command in Africa, right? And this expansion of neocolonial and colonial involvement in Africa under his administration. And so when we look at the extent of, quote, the historic dynamics of the Obama administration, we find the entrenchment of capitalist imperialism as a social order. And that's usually why Trump, when he came into existence, he had to try to roll back, right, the extent from which the United States was policing the rest of the world, right, under the Obama administration. You know, so there's a problem in our belief, right, that if you change the color of the guard, that you actually change the system that it represents. No, that's an illusion.
Mr. Muntaqim, after almost 50 years in prison, what are the dreams for the next 50?
That we will win. that we win. La lucha continua siempre.
Mr. Muntaqim, we are nearing the end of our interview. I would like to ask you to indicate to our internet users a book that you have read and a series that you watched during the pandemic, your favorites, after you have been released.
Okay.
A series or a movie.
Yeah.
Besides a book.
I am not very much a movie buff or a TV watcher. I do like reading. I do enjoy reading.
Are you already keen on managing computer, mobile, Netflix?
I know what those things are, but no, I'm not that technological savvy as of today. I'm growing. I mean, I'm developing. I'm learning the dynamics of
Facebook,
technology.
Facebook,
right?
Instagram, Twitter, mobile.
Yeah, Instagram. What's that? WeChat and what is that? TikTok and all the rest of that. No, I'm not. I don't want to be involved with that. But in terms of a book, my book.
Your book, but you are reading your own book?
I am teaching this now. I'm teaching this online.
What's the book about?
This book is a manual on how to build a movement, on how to build a revolution. All right. And so it is this book that I'm teaching online today. I have students from Canada, I have students in Europe, and people across the country who have signed up for my classes that I'm teaching on this book. So this is the book right now.
Which is its title?
Its title is "We Are Our Own Liberators."
We are our own liberators.
We are our own liberators. That's right. And that is the slogan that we need to manifest. That we need to make realize that we are, in fact, our own liberators. We're not looking for a messiah or a heroic individual, charismatic individual to come and save us. Right? We have to come to an understanding that our own oppression is based upon our own fight for liberation, our own fight for emancipation, and we have to be in it to win it. All right, and so that is the idea, that is the goal, the objectives that I'm seeking to manifest, right, by my own practice. I'm not just talking about it; I'm being about it, right? Engaging in the community and trying to build institutions that are alternative to the existing institutions, and those institutions that presently exist. Try to change it, a new paradigm, a new model from which we recognize our own common humanity, right? And our abilities to survive. That's the goal and objective for me and what I'm trying to teach young people today, that we are, in fact, our own liberators.
Mr. Muntaqim, thank you very much for your time, for this informative and exciting interview. I'm sure that as far as I am concerned, our internet users have enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
Take care and good luck in your new life.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your viewers as well. Go to in the spirit of Mandela. That's a campaign that we're working on today, right now. Coming out of Jericho movement that I am the founder of. We are bringing the international jurors to the United States, so that we can teach them or inform them of the conditions for which we engage in struggle today. That'll be on October 21st to October 23rd. The international jurors, we call it the International Tribunal 2021. It is a project that I originally initiated while I was still in prison. That was in 2016. I think I put out 2018, I put out the call for it. And we are now building the campaign now. We will be presenting a webinar for the international community in June to teach them, to inform them about the International Tribunal 2021. We'll go to the spiritofmandela.org and learn more about this campaign, this international jurors, that we charge genocides against the United States government, right? We are commemorating the 1951 recharge genocides by Paul Robeson and William Patterson when they first brought the petition to the United Nations. So this will be the 70th anniversary of recharge genocides. And so we are commemorating that and bring those same arguments, those same issues today to the international jurors. That's on October 21st to 23rd. To be held at Columbia University. It will be streamed online so the world can see the charges that we have raised against the United States imperialist government, against the black, brown, and red people, the indigenous people of this country. Recharge genocides.
And listening to the old Paul Robeson songs.
Yes. Not a bad idea.
Yes. Thank you very much again, Mr. Muntaqim, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Be safe.
You too. Encerramos assim mais uma edição do programa 20 Minutos Internacional. Hoje tivemos uma entrevista histórica com Jalil Muntaqim. Depois de quase 50 anos preso, o antigo militante dos Panteras Negras e do Exército de Libertação Negra obteve liberdade condicional e voltou às ruas com a sua família e para as trincheiras da luta pela emancipação da classe trabalhadora e do povo negro. Essa foi a nossa entrevista de hoje. Muito obrigado pela audiência e tenham um bom dia.
Para assistir novamente esse programa e a outras edições dos programas 20 Minutos, se inscreva no canal do Opera Mundi no YouTube. Curta e compartilhe nossos vídeos, deixe seus comentários. O jornalismo de Opera Mundi é mantido com o seu apoio. Faça uma assinatura solidária em www.operamundi.com.br. Com um pequeno valor mensal, você nos ajuda no desenvolvimento de um jornalismo independente e de qualidade. Obrigado pela audiência e até a próxima.